Money Matters on Fosse 107 with Hinckley and Rugby Building Society.
Okay, it is now time for Money Matters on Fosse 107. I'm joined by Colin Fyfe from Hinckley and Rugby Building Society. A very good morning to you, Colin.
Good morning, Mark.
So I've got some interesting questions for you today. A lot of it revolving around the amount of credit that we seem to be taking on, and sometimes it can be a bit overbearing. Question here is our economy driven by credit? Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning. I've got 3 credit cards, phone on credit, a car, standing orders, etc., etc. Is this the norm, or do you think things will ever change?
Well, I think the change to where we are today, Mark, probably happened, close to 40 years ago. And since that time, the availability of credit has been so much more. And I always sound a word of caution with this, because it is really easy to take on more and more debt. And some credit providers are more than happy to provide more and more debt for people. But ultimately, you've got to pay it back. And I know that a lot of this causes stress and concern in families in particular, as you try to balance the different payments. So, yeah, there is a lot of credit out there. The Bank of England keeps a close eye on it, but that's at a very high level. It doesn't really get into the nitty-gritty of individuals and whether they can afford it or not. And I think for me, I always personally like to have a buffer or a cushion, so I know that if something goes wrong, that I can rely on, a little bit of savings that I've got in an account, rather than knowing that if something goes wrong, I'm really struggling. So measure how much credit you're using and try not to take it all the way up until you're almost sinking, because that's a very difficult place to get out of.
Brilliant. Right, another one here, interesting as well. What's the maximum amount of people that you can have on a mortgage? I.e., could 4 people buy a house together?
Well, you're giving me a tough one there, Mark, because I don't know across the market what that is, because I'm not sure that there is a defined maximum. So if we talk about Hinckley and Rugby,
yeah,
quite often I see 4 people on a mortgage. Typically that can be the mother, father, son-in-law, daughter.
Yeah. And
big houses can quite easily be serviced by 4 people. Or let's say you and your wife are helping a son or daughter to get on the housing ladder, and it needs all your incomes on the mortgage for it to work. So 4 people is reasonably normal.
Brilliant, yeah. Okay, another interesting one here. What is the oldest that you can take a mortgage out on a property?
Well, there is no age limit for many lenders.
Right.
Now that doesn't mean that it's open season for anybody to get a mortgage. You've got to be able to prove a few things. You've got to be able to prove that you can service and repay the mortgage.
Yeah. And
you've got to demonstrate that it is the right thing for you to do at that time of life.
Yeah.
So it's now, certainly going back many years, it used to be retirement age. And that's a question in itself. What is retirement age these days? But
exactly, good question.
It used to be that's 60, 65. No longer the case. People can borrow with no limits. Sometimes it's better though. I mean, I personally don't like to see situations where people are borrowing and the repayment of that mortgage means they need to sell the house when they're 85, 90. Yeah. I don't think anybody really wants to be moving house at that type of age. So I think there's a bit of common sense comes into play as well.
Okay, thanks for that. Right, is there this is an interesting one, we've kind of touched on this a few times, is there a danger of the low-paid workers being priced out of the housing market?
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the biggest issues, I think, with the housing market, so that's why we at Hinckley and Rugby, we offer what's called joint borrower sole proprietor. So husband and wife going onto the mortgage with son or daughter so that they can get their first mortgage, and hopefully in time their incomes will grow and therefore they can afford the mortgage themselves. So that's a strategy. The other strategy is the government need to build more affordable homes.
Colin Fyfe from Hinckley and Rugby Building Society, thanks for joining us today. We'll talk to you very soon, mate.
Thank you, Mark. All the best. Bye-bye.
Cheers, mate.